Today we have the pleasure from hearing from Scott Lunt, who's an independent filmmaker and creative force behind Azadi, Freed Up Through Storytelling. He spent his time doing his undergrad at Brigham Young University, University of Utah, and San Francisco State University, where he earned his undergraduate degree in English. He then continued his education at BYU, where he received a master's degree in communication. Throughout his life, Scott has lived in Arizona, Washington, and currently resides in Colorado. He's highly involved in church service, including his calling to be a stake high counselor, where he works with English Connection houses. He also has a YouTube channel called Rivian Dad, where he connects with other people with the same interests. In 2018, after working for National Geographic, he began working on smaller independent documentaries. It was during this time that he learned about the Azadi program from a friend in Greece in search of a film and media teacher. Inspired by the initiative, Scott reached out with the idea of documenting the project. His documentary work blends both his professional expertise and personal commitment to supporting refugees in any way he can. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Scott Lunt as he joins our colloquium today.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, well, thank you for that introduction. I come here in kind of a roundabout way. I was a student here several years ago and left for work and finished my undergrad in San Francisco, and then came back as a grad student with my wife, who was also in law school at the same time. So we spent some time here doing mass communications, and it was that period from 2004 to 2007 when an interesting thing came on board called YouTube. And I happened to be studying mass communications, and I started thinking more about like how communications happens within the world, the digital world, right? And the communications program at the time was very print media focused. I don't even know, do they still have a paper newspaper on campus? Still, the Daily Universe? I don't even know if it's just digital anymore. But anyway, at the time it was all print, and we even had a thing called the Student Review. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It was kind of like the off-campus sort of, the professors might have heard of that. But through my time at BYU during my grad program, we thought a lot about communications in more of a mass context. But there's this weird thing that's happened, which is I've studied like this mass thing, but then it's sort of always comes back to this individual thing. And this is a thing, like this phenomenon we refer to as democratization, which is sort of this notion where everybody knows that CNNs of the world, these news media organizations that are intended to push out information in a mass way to a lot of people. But then the YouTubes of the world or Wikipedia or TikTok or all these things changes the equation so that individuals sort of can tell their own stories. And so the analogy I like to use is fly fishing. It's weird, but like you can set up a website or a video channel or whatever about fly fishing, and you could go to your local TV station and do a program about fly fishing, but you're not going to get very many people to watch it. But if you had the whole world and you could have a few thousand or a few 100,000 people subscribe to your channel from all around, then suddenly you're talking to somebody, right? You're giving a lecture, you're spreading information. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So last night we did a screening of the film. I see that a few of you were there. I hope some of you or many of you have actually watched the film Azadi. Thank you for nodding. If not, there's a link. It's on YouTube now. You can watch it there. But I do want to share that link out to you later if you haven't seen it. But we're going to talk about that today. But last night was kind of more of the what of the film. And I kind of think of art in three categories: the what, the why, and the how. Like, what is it? Like, what's the story, right? And then I like to think about why we tell that story. And then the how is more for today, like how we told the story. And I want to kind of get into more of the specifics today of how we tell the story. But first I want to kind of give a background. I'm going to check my notes here. All right, tell me how many, I was standing in the back and I noticed many of you have a screen you're looking at right now, your laptop, which is fine. How How many of you have a smartphone? Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. Okay, no surprise there. Raise your hand if you've watched a video on your smartphone in the last, say, day or two. Everybody. Raise your hand if you've actually recorded a video in the last few weeks, shared it with somebody, right? Most of us, right? So this is what we're talking about. Like, this is the sort of this new world. One of the questions that we got last night, which was a great question, I don't remember who asked it, Phoebe might remember, was like, why film? Why do you use the media of film to tell the stories of these women? And I kind of want to think more about that today. That's kind of what we're here for today. So keep your thoughts ready, because I want it to be a little bit of a discussion. If you have any thoughts or comments, please pop your hand up and let's talk about that. Hopefully we have somebody coming to help us with the lights for this screen. We're gonna talk for a bit between now and then, though. So to give you a little bit of background, I do want to show some stories or some images here. Maybe it's good enough to see. Can you see this at all? I'll kind of highlight it. So we went to Greece in it was 2018, but just a couple years before then, there had been this kind of massive issue of immigration, refugees, and so on in the Middle East, kind of Mediterranean area. And I kind of want to talk about the background of that and why that was what it was, right? And why we went to Athens instead of somewhere else. So here we have kind of the map. This is a screenshot from the film. And over here, all the way over here, you have Afghanistan. And then in between Afghanistan is Iran. And you have Syria here, which is important to our story. Iraq, which basically you can draw a hard line around that. No one touched that. And then we have Turkey. All of us know Turkey as a kind of in-between country. It's a little friendly to the West, but still kind of in the East. It's got some tensions there for sure. The leaders are not all the best, but they kind of have some decent, they kind of treat people okay, right? And then right here next to Turkey is Greece. And I want to go to this next image here, which is a close-up of that spot. So here we have Greece, and there's Turkey here. This up here is also Turkey, and up there is Bulgaria, which is right above Turkey. Now, one thing that's important to note about Bulgaria is that at the time we did the documentary, Bulgaria was not part of the Schengen zone of the EU. And if you don't know much about that, the Schengen zone is basically an agreement amongst all of the Western EU countries, like France and Spain and Greece and so on, where they have this agreement that people can travel between those countries if you have a certain type of passport. Bulgaria was not part of that. So you might wonder, like, why didn't people just go up to Bulgaria? Well, that's one reason why. So right over here, next to Greece or next to Turkey, I'll circle it for you here, is this island called Lesbos, or Lesbos, depending on how you read it. And there's this little patch of water right here that's about 16 to 18 miles. It's pretty treacherous, but that's the connection right there. I want to ask you all if you can venture a guess why I'm pulling this graphic up and why Lesbos matters to this story. Does anybody want to venture a guess? Yes, please.
It's how people entered into Greece. The refugees, they crossed from Turkey into Lesbos.
Right. This is how they get to Greece. Why do you think it was that they were going to Greece instead of somewhere else? Yes.
By the EU.
Yes. Do you know more about that? Does anybody know more specifics about the geopolitical situation here? Greece has this, oh shoot, I forgot in my notes somewhere. They have this policy about how they handle, the European Union has this policy about how they handle people who come into their borders. Generally speaking, and I think the United States is pretty good at this as well, we don't just send people back to dangerous places. We do send people back who are not there for decent reasons. But you send people back if they're from a place where you know have a pretty good confidence that they're going to be suffering, like danger to themselves or their families, or other human rights issues, right? So naturally, people are wanting to come to Lesbos. So I'm going to go back to that graphic that I started with. So let's talk about this again. So one of the characters in our story, as you recall, is Sakina. I'm going to talk a bunch about her today. She was from Afghanistan. She never lived in Afghanistan. She was born in Iran. Her family fled Afghanistan. We all know about the wars in Afghanistan. They went on for 40 years. In a lot of ways, they're still going on. So they fled over here. There's only one place really to go. So they go to Iran. Well, Iran is not a great place to live. And so naturally, people want to get out of there. So they go here to Turkey. Iraq and Syria are not very welcoming places either. So they go to Turkey, and then they figure out how to get across Turkey, and then they spend a lot of money to get on a dumb little rubber boat and cross that 16 miles. And you might remember from the news from several years ago, a lot of people did not make that transit. A lot of times they get caught and were turned around, but sometimes the boat sank. A lot of times the boat sank. It was pretty tragic. So we knew about this situation. A friend of mine approached me and said, hey, we're going to do this seminar in Greece where we're going to teach some newly arrived women about multimedia and how to tell their own stories. Do you want to come and teach the class? And I said, cool, that sounds great. I really want to do that. Can we make a documentary about it while we're doing it? She said, sure, let's do it. So we did that together. I invited a woman called Hannah. If you were there last night, you met her. She's my co-director. I felt it was important to bring Hannah along because naturally, as a man, I didn't quite have the same perspectives that she has. So it was important to have her there to help tell their story. So Hannah came, we got there to Greece, and we met these women to talk a little bit about the infrastructure of the place that was there. There was this group called the Melissa Network, and they were local Greek people who had set up this sort of shelter for women who would come. The women would come and just, it was free. They would sign up, and it was kind of a little place that they would just come and spend their days. They had childcare there, so some women would come and leave their kids so they could go to work. But mostly it was just a place for them to congregate and to talk. A lot of them spoke Farsi and common languages, so they would talk to each other, or there was a lot of English spoken as well. So that was kind of their gathering place. And then this Azadi group wanted to go to do this multimedia thing. So they actually put together a group of, they pulled from this group from Melissa, 10 women, and they used those 10 women for this lecture. And so that's when we showed up. And I was teaching the lecture while trying to make a film about it all at the same time. And Hannah was here, my co-director was there also helping to sort of like put the film together while we were teaching. So that's kind of the setup. We wanted to talk about, rather than this mass media CNN kind of story, we wanted to talk about their individual stories, but not me telling you what their individual stories, but more them telling their own individual stories. Now, this is what I want to think about and talk about a lot today. Tell me, someone here, if you can, what does this matter? Why does it matter? Like why do we care that they're telling their story instead of me telling the story for them? Yeah, there was a part of me telling their story, which I'm going to get to in a minute, but it was really more about them telling their own story. I want you to think about this and maybe some comments. Why do you think we wanted them to tell their story? How's that different? Maybe how's it different for you with your phones sharing videos to your friends and family and so on, or me posting on Rivian Dad on YouTube or something like, yes, in fact.
It just eliminates one level of bias because you don't impose your beliefs about their story on how you tell the story. They just get to tell it the way they.
Okay, yeah, very important. Yeah, eliminating the bias. Yeah.
It just shifts like the focus of the story in the film so much because like even for me going into the screening yesterday, I was like so worried that it was gonna be like so sad. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a bummer. I know like typically what we hear from the outside is like, oh, these refugees are so like they're going through these horrible things and that's so tragic, which is true. But when they told their own stories in the film, that wasn't what they talked about. It was like the things they were doing now to like make their lives better and like these hopeful things that they had for the future. Like it was just such a different focus when they were able to tell their own story.
And I will say that all of the women, even though we only highlighted 3 in the film, all of the women had that approach. All of them did. They all had something going. Like they wanted somehow to like connect, to make a job, to get a job, to like help their families and so on. Like they really, truly did. And yes, we wanted to tell a positive and happy story, but really the content came from them. So you're absolutely right. And I think there's something about shifting the ownership of the story that matters. Like if I post a video on YouTube, that's me telling a story. That's not CNN telling a story. That's me telling a story. And there's something different about that, right? It might be dumb, but it's my story. And I think that empowers me. And I think these women kind of experience the same thing. Any other thoughts about that? Okay. We have person maybe. I want to talk a little bit about this. This is anybody recognize this painting? Van Gogh. My wife and I talked about this on the way down here quite a bit about how sort of art is a way of connecting us to the human experience, right? Robin, what's the quote that you said that Heidegger?
So there's a famous German philosopher, and he talks about how the work of art is connecting us to the essence of being, right? So if you look at this piece of art, it's like you connect to those people, right? You get a sense of they're working, they're tired, they're
See that very well.
or this is the one that he talks about is the shoes. Just like looking at shoes, you can connect to the humanity of someone else. And by connecting to the humanity of someone else, you connect to your own humanity. And so the work of art is not just the painting or the film, it's the opportunity for us to see beyond ourselves to the human experience.
Okay, well said. I knew she could say it better than me. Yeah, so that's why I think these films are important, because this is a way for us as viewers to connect to them. We can see, the shoes and think, oh, I have shoes. My shoes aren't that worn out, but hey, we're the same. We both have shoes. And yet I can kind of see like, oh, there's some work in those shoes. I can sympathize with this person, right? So that's sort of the work of art, I think. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the approach we took in this film. There was one other aspect, and I'm going to play the clip in a minute, if we can get the lights down, hopefully, where we talk about Sakina's story as she arrived in Greece. And something really interesting about our time there, we talked to all the women there, a lot of the women there that didn't want to talk about arriving. They didn't like being referred to as refugees. And you can kind of understand, right? Like that's not who they are. But of course, for part of our documentary, we felt like it was important to share that story, but we wanted to be sensitive of that. So we did the film, we recorded their interviews of them talking about how they arrived, but they didn't, we didn't have any film footage or anything. Naturally, they don't have photos of them, hiking through the mountains of Turkey. So we took those images and we thought, you know what, let's put artwork to it. Let's draw some images and see if we can bring out the personality and the story while being still sensitive. So this is some of my very initial drawings, and you'll recognize they're not great drawings, but you'll recognize the shapes and the structures of some of these images when I play this little piece in a second. Of the animated part of the story. And here on the left column, this is the text, the dialogue that they're saying. So first she says, when I was in Iran, I never felt I'm human. I just felt I'm a robot and I had to work. And that's why I thought, okay, we'll just start with her on the street, right? Sitting on a bench and then move through that. So here's some of these images. Here's an important piece. This pair of images is really bad drawing, but this is my idea of her having to pay for an ID card in Iran. And I just sort of drew a counter there of what I imagined it would have been like. And then her working in her uncle's sweatshop in Iran. So let's play that portion of the film, and we can talk about it for a minute.
When I was in Iran, I felt I am human. I just felt I'm robot and I had to work and they called me Afghanian dirty. We couldn't travel in Iran because we were Afghanistan. And I hated my country because I was born a refugee. Why? Because we had a war there for 40 years and they didn't get tired. But I am tired as a refugee. We don't have good identity there. For example, ID card, we should pay for ID card because we are a big family and my father couldn't pay. That's why I decided to work when I was 9 years old. When I was 15, we understood a little sister had a heart problem. The nurse told my father, because you're Afghanistani, we cannot surgery your daughter's heart because you don't have ID card and you don't have any identity. After that, my parents, they decided to move in Europe. And I was so happy and I didn't afraid of mountains and the difficult ways. And I said, it's better.
Okay, I want to go back just to one thing I'm going to freeze on for a second. For that. This one. This to me was the first image that I thought of in this entire film after we had recorded it, because I really wanted to talk about, or I wanted to think about how Sakina was present in this moment. She probably wasn't. So this is an artist's interpretation, right? But I'm putting her in this scene, and the artist who drew this is putting her in the scene, but there's some emotion there, right? We connect with her because she's watching her little sister and her parents get this dumb news, like, oh, sorry, we can't give you, we got plenty of equipment, we know how to do it, but we can't do it because you don't have an ID card, or you don't have the $50 or whatever that it would take to buy the ID card, right? So anyway, there we go. Sorry, getting a little caught up in this. Thoughts about that. Let's have a bit of a minute here to talk about that, and then I want to go into some of the other student films that we recorded that are not in the film. Any thoughts about this sort of notion of presenting your story through art and how what difference that makes? Yeah.
I just have a question. Did
Yeah.
the women, like, did Sakina, like, get to see these illustrations and stuff at all? Like, I'm just curious, like, what their perception of.
Yeah. She didn't get to see it until after the film was done.
Okay.
Same is true for all the others as well. But that's just kind of a filmmaking thing. We wanted to make sure we finished the film before we shared it with them. But we also wanted to be really sensitive. And I think I remember circulating some of the early edits just to make sure that they were not going to object. Now, we had legal rights to publish it because we'd make sure the paperwork was ready. But what was more important to us is that we were doing it in a way that was sensitive to them. Very good question. Any other questions about that? Okay, let's go on. I want to talk. Looks like we're probably not, unfortunately, going to get our lights down. But so I think we can do. I think we do this okay though. So here's some of the films that the other students made. So if you didn't see the film, the students made their own films. And then at the end of the film, we have this sort of like the final scene of us at this sort of screening area in the Melissa building where they watched each other's films, which was really sweet. And these are some of the films that we didn't include in the Azadi documentary. This is a woman named Bahare, who I will tell you something. She has never been on an airplane before this. That's important to know. Here we go. This is her film.
They said I couldn't do it. They said I could not be a pilot. They said you're a girl. They said it's difficult, but I've always made difficult easy. I came here to Greece 2 years ago as a refugee with my mother and my sister. My father it was too dangerous for an adult man to come illegally. When I came, I did not speak a word of Greek, but today I speak the language. I came to a new country and I finished my high school. I have always made difficult easy. They said I could not be a pilot, but today I am on my way to be a pilot. I have my admission letter to Flight Coordinator School in my hand. My name is Bahar Hosseini and I'm strong.
So I'm sorry the audio is not as good as I wanted it to be there. Is there a way to bring that up on your end, London? Is that probably from my computer, but maybe the next one will be better. So if you didn't hear very well, she wants to be a pilot. She's never been on an airplane, but she wants to be a pilot. And we're all like, cool, good for you, right? Why not? And so she got papers to go to flight training school, which is super cool. She's not on the way to being a pilot yet, but she will maybe eventually. She used her word strong. And this is something else I wanted to talk about. This was a great way of facilitating the storytelling. This was not my idea. This was Priyali, the woman who put the Azadi program together. She came to them at the very first day and said, okay, I want you all to think of a word, one word that describes you. And they each had a word. Bahare's word was strong. And so she kind of built her film around that word. Let's go to one of the other films, talk about theirs. Let's see, Fariba. Yeah, let's do Fariba. Audio's all the way up. Hopefully, this will sound okay. Here we go.
وقتی من از ایران به آتن آمدم تقریبا 1 سال در کمپ مهاجرین زندگی می کردم. هیچ چیز برای انجام دادن در کمپ نبود ولی من نمی خواستم وقتم را هدر بدهم. بنابراین شروع کردم به تماشای فیلم ها در یوتیوب برای یادگیری دستبند درست کردن. همه دستبند را دوست دارند و خیلی زود مردم خواستند که دستبند بخرند. خیلی زود شروع کردم به فروختن در فستیوال و در دیگر سازمان‌های مهاجرین. به خاطر اینکه مردم زیادی از کارم استقبال کردن، من مدل‌های دیگری را هم یاد گرفتم. الان مردم می‌آیند پیش من دستبندهایم را به آلمان می‌برند و در آنجا می‌فروشند. من به وسیله کشتی‌های بادی که ما مهاجرها با آن آمده ایم کیف می‌دوزم. من در کارم سعی می‌کنم نشان بدهم مهاجرین چطور مبارزه می‌کنند. من عاشق این هستم که کارآفرین باشم. من عاشق این هستم که ببینم مردم چیزهایی را که من می‌سازم بپوشند. My name is Fariba Amini and I am an entrepreneur.
We had each of them hold up a sign. We only used a couple of them, but her word was entrepreneur. If you didn't see, I'll give you a little play-by-play of what this is. But she basically makes bracelets and she makes handbags. And what's really fascinating, she says in the film, is that these handbags are made from cut up boats, refugee boats that she saved. She took us into her little workshop, which very interestingly was in the basement of a very nondescript building. I had to like figure out how to get there, knock on the door. She was very suspicious because they're not allowed to have workshops in this part of Athens. So she was doing this on the DL. And so she like snuck us in and then she took us through and showed us her workshop, which was very robust. Also very interesting, she was working with a guy, roughly her age. The two of them worked together a lot, making these handbags. And there was never mention of any romantic interest between the two, but we learned later that they were actually dating. But because of her culture, they just simply didn't talk about it. Nobody ever mentioned it. Like the parents were never supposed to know because it was a big deal, right? If the parents did know. So I just thought that was really interesting. She said something at the end here, which was good. You know, I love to see what people that wear what I created. And she thinks of herself as an entrepreneur. I think this is really cool because this is dispelling one of the myths of sort of that we hear in the media about refugees is that they're here to just like you cause trouble and crime and all this. None of the people we met were in that category, even close. In fact, quite the contrary. They were very careful about breaking any rules because they didn't want to have to be deported or, you know, anyway. All right, so that's Fariba. Mabube, I love Mabube. She's so cool. She's a chef. She's going to talk here about her time being a chef.
یه سلام گرم از عطر زعفران گلاب تا ترش و شیرینی فسنجان. حدود به 3 سال است که از ایران به یونان آمدم. از شبکه زنبوری ملیسا معرفی به عرصه آشپزی شدم. حدود به 10 ماه است که در کندوی ملیسا برای دختران آشپزی می‌کنم. به خاطر اینکه آنها هم همانند من یک دختر مهاجر هستند. و برای من این موفقیت مهم هست چون که توانستم بدون اینکه زبان این کشور را بدانم قادر به ارتباط با افراد مختلف بشوم. از طریق 2 فستیوال آشپزی با طعم، غذاها و فرهنگ کشورم. و این موفقیت را با تمام وجود و با عشق بردم. My name is محبوب توکلی. I'm a realist. من کلمه واقع بین رو انتخاب کردم به خاطر اینکه هر جایی که برم باید تلاش کنم چون آینده برای من آماده پیش نمیاد و همیشه باید تلاش کنم. Excellent.
I love that ending. We left it in on purpose because, and I had to convince her. She's like, no, cut it out. I'm like, no, it's so perfect. It's you like holding it together till just at the end, you're like, oh, I can't let go. Finally. Which I thought was beautiful. Mabube is, by the way, a very good chef. I learned a phrase recently called death by dumplings, like where you like go to a person's house and they're so nice to you, they feed you everything they can and you have to eat it all. And if ever any of you have done or will someday travel to countries similar to this, you might get faced with a situation where you are like have mountains of food and culturally you're required to eat as much of it as you can. And it's amazing. It's really amazing. Mabube is really interesting because she is from Iran. So she also, you know, is from a culture that, here you can see, I love that opening shot. Notice she's not wearing a headscarf, a hijab. She decided she didn't want to when she moved to Iran. And of course, we respect that. And all of the other women did. We had many conversations about this. And I was able to, a little awkwardly, talk about how I wear religious clothing underneath my clothes. They wear it over their clothes and how there was some similarity there, right? And we were able to relate. They were like, what? That's weird. That's a little weird. But that was one great way of us relating to them. I want to talk, the last one of these are the outtake student films. And I saved this to last because it also has the same topic about the hijab and about identity. And I maybe want to take a minute to talk about this as well. So this is Nargis. She's the sweetest. She's got this like perfect smile. I love it. Can you see the subtitles? Okay, good.
Writing is a way to express my word to the world. I like to write at night when the house is quiet. It is a small 2 rooms apartment, and this is my space. I started writing when I was 15 years old. I was living in Tehran. My family fled Afghanistan when my older brother was shot dead. I was in my mother's womb. I grew up in Iran, learning and understanding what it means to be different, what it means to be an outsider. The book I'm writing is about being different. Writing helps me to focus on each word and each aspect of my life. For example, my hijab. It makes people look at me and question my identity. They think I'm not a modern woman, so I write my thoughts. I write about modernity and freedom of the mind is not about clothing. I know I will be a successful writer someday because I have ambition, and that for a modern Muslim woman is not a bad thing. My name is Nargis Amini and I am ambitious.
Okay, she's just the best. I love Nargis. We really wanted to highlight her in our film as well, but there just wasn't enough space. She was certainly the next in line as far as after the 3 that we did highlight. Let's talk about this for a minute. She says basically that wearing the hijab to her has nothing to do with modernity, but people kind of challenge that. What do you all think about that? Okay, so just if you don't know the context, the hijab is a piece of cloth that the women wear in many of these Muslim countries, and it's symbolic of their kind of like deference to God. It is not intended to be oppression of any kind. We kind of, from the West, we can kind of see it that way at times, but that's not their intent. And that's just why all of these women who had decided to maintain this tradition when they had moved to a country that didn't expect them to. What is this interplay between modernity and our appearance or something like this? Can anybody talk to me about that? Somebody, yeah.
I've loved this presentation because we're talking a lot about the freedom and the ability to express yourself and share your story in a way that is authentic to you. To not be forced to have someone else interpret your story and take out the things that are interesting to them and make it, you know, an easily digestible story, but share what is important to you. And I kind of view this in a similar way where I think that these women and all women should have the freedom to be able to express themselves in ways that feel genuine and authentic to them. And if that is genuine and authentically how they want to present their religion and faith and their femininity or whatever it represents to them, I like that interplay of what we're talking about today, and the freedom and independence that comes with being able to express your way or express yourself in ways that feel authentic to you.
Excellent. Well said. Any other thoughts about that? Yeah.
I think there's also a false dichotomy of being more conservative in your appearance and being modern. I think there's this idea that they have to be mutually exclusive. Whereas you can 100%, choose to be more, conservative in your appearance, right? You can choose to cover your hair, and that doesn't exclude you from being a modern woman if existing in this current age and time. And I think that's a narrative that people try to force. Unfortunately, I think even women on other women, that like,
Of course, yeah.
That this can't exist. But I think that's the beauty of these women telling their stories, is to say, no, look, like here I am in this space, and I'm choosing to dress this way, and I'm here, and I can coexist in the same spaces.
Right. Very well said. We don't have a whole lot of time left. Oh, you were gonna say
I was
something.
just gonna say, I also think like because a lot of the women, like when I watched the movie last night and like on here, a lot of them talk about identity, and it can be so hard moving to a brand new country, a brand new culture, learning a new language, changing everything about what you do, that like having to take away that one last thing about yourself can honestly be really damaging to their like self-image, who they are. So like being able to keep it would just be like a way to hold on to like that where they
Right.
are.
And it's on us, the fellow human beings, to respect that. And honor that, right? Do we have questions we want to talk about in the last 10 minutes or so, 8 minutes? Do we want to talk about those, or we want? Oh, yeah, quite. I mean, we can just open up general questions.
But last night, so I'm just wondering about the name of your project.
Azadi is the word in Farsi for freedom. It means freedom in Farsi. And I took the name from the name of the program, which was called Azadi for that reason. So the Azadi program is this traveling program that's tried to help several women adjust into their new life through this means. And I thought that was an appropriate name for the film as well. So that's why it's called Azadi. Any questions? Yeah.
Goes along with my question. I was gonna ask if they all spoke Persian, Farsi, or if there was some.
I'm trying to remember. I believe all of them spoke Farsi. There were a couple women here who spoke in subtitles, or spoke in their native language. They didn't speak very good English, but they did speak pretty good English. Almost all of them spoke English to some degree. And as you can see, some of them spoke very good English, like Nargis. Her English was fine. We would use her as translators a lot. Her sister, who was the one who did the bracelets, didn't speak English, and Nargis would translate for Famini, or what's her name, Fananas, all the time. So anyway, other questions?
So I'm going to give a response really fast to
Okay.
this presentation, and then we're going to open it up for questions.
Oh, good.
So Scott Lunt's documentary, Azadi, offers us a closer look at the experiences faced by refugee women with a focus on their journey towards freedom and empowerment. The title Azadi means freedom or liberty, which is a main theme of the film, highlighting the challenges the women faced and continue to face through the use of powerful storytelling. The stories these women shared gives us, the viewer, a closer glimpse into what it would be like to leave one's own country, culture, and language and adopt an entirely new one. A reality that many women face as the numbers of refugees rise. Through this documentary, we see these women given opportunities to engage in media making and film, platforms that more often than not, have been completely inaccessible to them. Through this medium, we are able to share their voices and stories, shining a light on the complexity of their lives. We see struggle, but more importantly, courage and determination for a better future, not only for themselves, but for their families, and those around them. The documentary also encourages viewers to think critically about pressing global issues such as displacement, gender inequality, and unequal access to opportunities. These themes are not just abstract concepts, they represent the realities of millions of people around the world who face systemic barriers to safety, security, and basic human rights. There is power in this connection to humanity, as mentioned earlier, and that is essential in driving change and creating solidarity. We are grateful for Scott for joining us today and sharing his work with us. And now we will have the opportunity to ask further questions. And as a reminder, on Zoom, you can ask your questions through the chat.
Okay, thanks. Any specifics do we have yet, Lucy? We have another one here in the audience.
Sorry. I'll introduce the Q&A. So I'll start, but what we'll do is you'll just raise your hand, and if you can introduce yourself with your name, major, and minor. So I'm Mackenzie. My major is art history. My minor is global women's studies. So during this film, there's a lot of talk about like identity. So how did you find that the women, while doing this project, found their own identity, and how did you find your identity during this project?
I think it was less about finding their identity, more about preserving their identity, and telling the story of their identity. And so I think like through this simple exercise of thinking a word, her word was ambitious. Like it probably crystallized a little bit in her, like, yeah, I'm ambitious. I can do this, right? And me, I've thought about this since then. Maybe you have here, like, what's my word, right? If I was to make a film like this, what would my word be? Probably be something like storyteller or something like that. But you all would have different words, right? So that's what I think about that. Any other questions? Like here we have one.
Sorry, I'm Audrey. I'm an international relations major and global women's studies minor. Okay. I am kind of wondering what was your intended audience with this film, and did you reach that audience? How does Greece feel about refugees and immigration? And do you think that this could have a positive impact on those people who might not feel so warmly to refugees?
Yeah, I do think that this could have a positive impact. That's why we made it. And it was a labor of love. We literally spent money, Robin's money, actually, our executive director who sponsored the film. It was a significant amount of money to make it, but the whole point was so that we could get the stories out there and hopefully move the needle just a little bit, perhaps. Greece is not super psyched about having refugees there. You can imagine it's a big problem, not unlike our country, right? But I think if we look at it from a different perspective, you know, those policies of the policies of our country and others could actually open up a little bit more and be helpful because we've got the resources. We can do it. It's hard. Denver, we've seen a lot of new immigrants recently, and it's been tough. But it's also been great when we've got to know them. I do the English Connect, which, by the way, if you're wondering what you could do to like help this refugee situation, that's one really great, easy access way. Find an English Connect program that's close to you and go and sit in with the people and learn English with them, right? This is a church program that's been going on, and it's great. We have 30 to 40 people that come every Tuesday night and learn a little bit of English. But more than that, they connect with us. They feel welcome. And that's my whole thing, is I want them to feel loved and welcome, right? And I think, I mean, this is a small film compared to something, you know, with a massive budget and so on, but hopefully a little bit of an audience. It's like circulated on PBS and a couple of universities and so on. So it's reached a few people. Hopefully this helps a little bit, you know, but thank you. Great question. Others, yes.
This is Ellie. I'm studying international relations and
Hi, Ellie.
doing research on cultural preservation among refugee children in Europe.
Okay.
And so you showcased a woman who stopped wearing a hijab. And I just wondered, are there any factors that you saw that influenced like a lack of cultural preservation, or when people did preserve their culture, what do you think influenced them that way?
I wasn't in their lives quite enough to know what those influences might have been, but you could see from the outside that they were a little skittish to be out in public because all these women perceived, if not real, probably pretty real, that they were looked at as an other. So they wanted to integrate. A lot of it came through their children, as you were pointing out, like getting those kids in school was really important to them. That was like highest importance. And in the film, we talk about a woman named Farnaz who has 2 kids, and she gets them into the school, which is really hard. And I think that's, I don't know, less about like their appearance and more about just their ambition and like gumption and like grit to get that stuff done. So anyway, great question. Hopefully that's a good answer.